بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is lesson number 6 of the series History of the Quran and Sunnah. This lesson is going to be about the compilation of the Quran during the time of Uthman bin Affan radiallahu anhu. جمع القرآن في عهد عثمان رضي الله عنه. And I should review with you the main points of how the Quran was actually compiled in the time of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. So the reason for the compilation of the Quran during the time of Abu Bakr is that many of the Sahaba who had memorized the Quran were killed in battle, were murdered and killed in battle. So it was feared that many of those who have memorized the Quran would die. So it would be appropriate to make sure that the Quran is completely gathered in one volume from the memorization of the people or the Sahaba who memorized it, as well as the writing. And as we know, that during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, hundreds, if not, tens, if not hundreds of the companions memorized the Quran, as well as the Prophet ﷺ made sure that the whole Quran was written down, and it was written down in different writing materials that were kept in the house of the Prophet ﷺ. So, and then the second point that I want to remind you of is this compilation of the Quran followed a very meticulous methodology that was established by the committee that Abu Bakr established or appointed, headed by Zayd bin Thabit radiallahu anhu. And we mentioned in the previous lesson why Zayd bin Thabit. And of course he was supervised by Umar radiallahu anhu, Abu Bakr, and a few others of the companions. Now, it had these characteristics. It followed the matching the written material with the memorization of the Sahaba, including himself, and the owner of the manuscript that was found with that Sahabi that would present it, and the four Khalifas, or the like Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali, and few others of the companions, that would make sure that it matched their memorization, and it was, as well as the written material and the memorization of the person or the Sahabi who brought it forward. That is one condition. The other condition is that there were two witnesses, himself and another witness, that showed that he had this written material written in the presence of the Prophet ﷺ and based upon his dictation and his recitation. And then considering the last review of the Quran with Jibreel alayhi salam and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, al-arda al-akhira, the last browsing or the last review of the Quran that took place twice actually in the last year during the month of Ramadan before the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away. And that review was actually witnessed by Zayd bin Thabit himself and two other companions, besides that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ recited it after that to the multitude of the companions who were present in the masjid and would read it to them. And it was witnessed by these three companions as well as the other companions who heard it from the Prophet ﷺ. It's the same Quran definitely, but it was the browsing, as we know that Jibreel was would review the Quran with Prophet Muhammad ﷺ once every year for the 22 years of 23 and 22 years of the revelation of the Quran every year in Ramadan. And of course that last review would actually exclude the abrogated verses of the Quran that were abrogated actually and lifted and removed. by the order of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So now let's go to the point where now we know that the compilation of the Quran during the time of Abu Bakr was, let's say, started by the loss of life of some or many of the companions who memorized the Quran. Now, what actually led to the compilation of the Quran during the time of Uthman? And this is the hadith that was narrated by Imam Bukhari that will explain to us actually why Uthman radiallahu anhu took that initiative. Imam al-Bukhari narrates in his Sahih book, Fil Jami' al-Sahih, from Anas radiallahu anhu, that Hudayfa ibn al-Yaman radiallahu anhu came to Uthman after being in an expedition, multiple expeditions of the conquest of Azerbaijan and Armenia with the people of Iraq. He had been alarmed at the difference in recitation of the Quran amongst the people who entered Islam. So he listened to them reading the Quran, and he was alarmed at how many of them differed in the way they recited the Quran, or in the verses of the Quran that were supposed to be similar. So he had been alarmed that he noticed these differences. He alerted Uthman to the dire consequences of such differences, fearing that it would lead the Muslims to differ on the Book of Allah, as it happened to the Jews and the Christians with the books that were sent to their prophets. Therefore, Uthman radiallahu anhu sent to Hafsa radiallahu anha. Hafsa was the wife of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and also was the daughter of Umar radiallahu anhu. And Umar radiallahu anhu was the second Khalifa who inherited the big compilation of the Quran, the big volume that he took it from Abu Bakr and kept it with him for 12 years, the time of his Khilafah, until he died, and then it was kept after that in the house of Hafsa radiallahu anha. So he asked Hafsa to send that volume to him. And it was like several material, but they were bound together. Several writing material, several sheets. It could be, animal skin, and that were bound together, but it was not in order as we have it now. So therefore, Hafsa sent it to him, and Uthman radiallahu anhu. So thereafter, she sent them to Uthman, who ordered Zayd bin Thabit, Abdullah bin Az-Zubayr, Sa'ad bin Abi Waqqas, and Abdul Rahman ibn Al-Harith ibn Hisham. He ordered these 4 men. They copied them into Mus'hafs, what we call Mus'haf now, which is a book. They copied them into huge books. They made 4 copies of them. Uthman said to the 3 of them, 3 from Quraysh, and these 3 were Abdullah ibn Zubayr, Sa'ad bin Abi Waqqas, and Abdul Rahman bin Al-Harith bin Hisham. He ordered them that if you differ in the pronunciation of any of the Quran, any verse of the Quran, place it as the dialect of Quraysh. Place it the same way that it was revealed in the dialect of Quraysh. Or in the wording of the hadith says, Uthman said to the 3 from Quraysh, if you differ with Zayd bin Thabit on anything of the Quran, to write it with the tongue of Quraysh, as it was revealed in their tongue. That's what he said, as it was revealed in their tongue. The tongue means the language or the dialect. They did so. They copied everything in the Mus'hafs, and Uthman returned the original copy to Hafsa radiallahu anha. He sent a copy to each area of the Muslim world and kept copy for himself. So there were 4 copies. That's the most accurate opinion, is that there were 4 copies, not 7 copies. Uthman kept 1 with him and sent 3 one to Al-Kufa, one to Al-Basra, and one to Ash-Sham, which is Damascus. So from this, there are a few things that we need to talk about from this hadith, actually, and these issues. We will find that the first issue is that the reason why Uthman radiallahu anhu compiled the Quran in one volume and copied it into 4 copies sent to the different areas of the Islamic world at the time was to prevent further disputes and differences among the Muslims who learned the Quran according to what their teachers actually taught them. So these new Muslims who came into Islam, they learned the Quran with the Sahaba. The Sahaba spread after the Prophet, after the death of the Prophet, they spread through the Islamic world with the campaigns and the jihad and the conquest. So they spread, and with them they memorized the Quran, and some of them had manuscripts as well, and they were teaching the people the Quran. That is their job, and they were teaching them as they were taught by the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so he wanted, when he did that, he didn't want any dispute on the dialect or on the way that they recite the Quran. And now we will understand why this actually happened, and why would there be a difference in the way they recite the Quran. So these Sahaba used their own memorization of the Quran that was according to what they learned from Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Some may have still memorized it upon a dialect that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam taught them. And what does that mean? We can learn this from the hadith, many hadith that were narrated from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that shows what we call that the Quran was revealed upon or in 7 dialects or 7 letters or sab'ati ahruf. One of the ahadith, both Al-Bukhari and Muslim narrated from Ibn Abbas, that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Jibreel read the Quran to me in several huruf, which we will come to explain as dialects, in several dialects. So I asked him to increase, and he would do so until he completed them to 7 dialects. 7 dialects. So the Prophet ﷺ himself would ask him to increase the number of dialects. And why is that? We will see from the second hadith why this took place. At-Tirmidhi reported from Ubay bin Ka'b radiallahu anhu that the Prophet ﷺ also said, the Messenger of Allah met Jibreel at the rocks of Al-Marwa. So he's saying that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ met Jibreel at the rocks of Al-Marwa. The Messenger of Allah ﷺ then said to Jibreel, I was sent to unlettered nation. They have the old man, the old woman, the young boy. He said, tell them, Jibreel told him, tell them to read the Quran in 7 letters, meaning 7 dialects. In the narration of Hudhayfa, he said, the Prophet ﷺ said, I said, O Jibreel, I was sent to an unlettered nation. They have the man, the woman, the young girl, the old man who had never read a book. He said, indeed, the Quran was sent in 7 letters. So this hadith, it shows that the Prophet ﷺ reasoning in many hadith actually it showed that the Prophet ﷺ asked for leniency, asked for making it easy for his ummah, making it easy for the people who are unable to learn the Quran upon the dialect of Quraysh. As we know, in the beginning, the Quran was revealed in Mecca with the dialect of Quraysh. And when they migrated to Medina, and when their other tribes used to come and now join Islam, and they need to learn the Quran, they need to hear it from the Prophet ﷺ, it would be difficult for them to learn a new dialect, which is the dialect of Quraysh. And now to explain to you the special characteristic of the dialect of Quraysh. Quraysh was an open, or Mecca was an open society. It was an open city. It received people every year for the Hajj. So they got used to the dialect of other people, whereas other tribes were closed tribes. I mean, you would be actually born in this tribe, raised in this tribe, and die in this tribe without having to leave anywhere else. And it would be that they just got used to the way they spoke Arabic. And they all spoke Arabic. It was Arabic that they spoke. And the Quran was revealed in the Arabic language. But these are different dialects. As we see, you have the, in one country you have different dialects of the same language. Different way of talking, different accents, and all of this. People use some words and they don't use other words. Give you an example. Some like in the Quraysh dialect, the present tense of the verb starts with a fatha. Na'malu, for example, or na'kulu, or things of that nature. And then in other dialects, it starts with a kasra. Ni'mal, for example. And you find this actually in the way we speak Arabic sometimes with other people. You would recognize, oh, this man is from Morocco, or from the North Africa, the west part of North Africa. This man is from Egypt. That's an Egyptian accent. That's a Palestinian accent. Even in Palestine, the dialect that's spoken in the village is different from the dialect that's spoken in the different cities. You can tell that this person is from Nablus and that's from Jerusalem. Same thing with the Gulf region. So they have different accents, and some words you really have to actually ask them what that means. So the Prophet ﷺ wanted to make this easy for the people and make it easy for them to learn the Quran. Mind you, it's the same message, it's the same verses, the same meaning, but sometimes it would be different words that are used, or different way of pronouncing the word. Sometimes different way of putting some words before the others, the order of the words. So all of this were actually revealed, allowed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be revealed in these dialects, so people can find it easy for them to understand the Quran. And so it happened in 7 dialects. And obviously there were 7 tribes. There were more than 7 tribes. So these are the dialects that can be understood by most of the tribes. So in the beginning, when the Prophet ﷺ migrated to Medina, so the Prophet ﷺ would ask Jibreel to give him more, and the Prophet described it. Even Uthman radiallahu anhu rose over the member one day and he said, "Who among you," and it was full, the masjid was full of companions, "Who among you heard the hadith from the Prophet ﷺ that the Quran was revealed in 7 languages, or 7 dialects, or 7 ahrus, 7 letters, and all of them are anyone that you read with any of them will suffice. Kafin, shafin," the hadith says. There were multitude of companions, over 20 companions who said yes, which gives us that this hadith have reached, according to some of the scholars like Abu Ubaid al-Qasim, the Abu Ubaid al-Qasim said that this hadith reached the level of tawatur, meaning that yes, indeed, the Quran was revealed in 7 dialects, in 7 ahruf. Now, a lot of the scholars differed on what these ahruf are. I just gave you the most agreed upon and the one that you can actually understand without going into the different opinions of the scholars. They actually did about 35 to 36 opinions of what these are. But generally, these are different dialects that were revealed to make it easy for the Muslims of the time, or the Sahaba of the time from the different tribes who were not able to read or write, that they can take that without having to learn the dialect of Quraysh. There are ahadith you can find that some of the Sahaba actually would hear another Sahabi read the Quran and would find it that, oh, he's reading the Quran in a different way. And they would go to the Prophet ﷺ, the hadith. Umar radiallahu anhu heard Hisham bin Hakim bin Hizam asked, reading Surah Al-Furqan, and he, in his prayer, and he waited. He says he was reading Al-Furqan in a way I didn't hear it from the Prophet ﷺ. So Umar brought him from his clothes, like dragging him to the Prophet ﷺ, and said, "O Messenger of Allah, Umar, Hisham is reading it, reading Al-Furqan. I never heard Al-Furqan being read. You taught me Al-Furqan. It's different from what you taught me." So the Prophet ﷺ told Umar to leave him alone. Arsilhu ya Umar, leave him now. Read Hisham. Hisham read. The Prophet ﷺ said, this is how it was revealed. Then told Umar to read, and Umar read, and he said, this is how it was revealed. The Quran was revealed in 7 ahruf. And he pointed to them not to differ, not to make this a point of dispute and a point of discord in the ummah. So the idea is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allowed the Quran to be revealed in 7 dialects out of mercy, to make it easy for the people to learn the Quran, especially in the early stages of these people becoming Muslim and not knowing the dialect of the Quran when it was revealed in the dialect of Quraysh. So why should it be a reason for discord and dispute among the companions? And that's why when Hudhayfa ibn al-Yaman radiallahu anhu saw that happening, it alarmed him. He was alerted that this could be a cause for discord in the Muslim Ummah and a big fitna in the Muslim Ummah where they differ upon the Book of Allah. And that's why he ran to Uthman radiallahu anhu and told him what he observed. The Quran was, so now we know what the purpose behind it. Now we know there are different dialects. We know it happened early in the migration to Medina. And we know that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ kept asking Jibreel time and time again to increase the number until they reached 7. We have to also know that all of these 7 dialects were included in the copy that Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu compiled and gathered. So all these different variations, and it's not like too many, but things that people will be able to read and understand regardless of what tribe they are from, what dialect they are from. So it was all included in the copy of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. Well, the last browsing, when the last ard or reviewing of the Quran at the time, at the last year of the Prophet ﷺ, between Jibreel and Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, that was witnessed by Zayd bin Thabit, it confirmed the Quran and how it was supposed to be gathered. So it was gathered upon that last browsing. And the several dialects that entered into the copy of Abu Bakr were based on the memorization of other Sahaba and the written, and they only accepted what was actually mutawatir, meaning that was revealed or was given to them through multitude of companions who memorized it, and the written copy as well with witnesses. So it was mutawatir. None of them were like, let's say, one of the books that was written, or one of the copies that was written, was by Ibn Mas'ud. Ibn Mas'ud, the narration to Ibn Mas'ud, or the Sahifa of Ibn Mas'ud, was not actually, let's say, sifted as it was in the last browsing. So Ibn Mas'ud sometimes would even write his own comments in a way where the tafsir, his understanding. So it was his own copy, not to be actually transmitted to others. It was his to keep. It was something that he wanted to learn from. But when he would recite the Quran as the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ taught him, and as was the recitation of the four Khalifas, the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, the Muhajirin and the Ansar, the immigrants and the Ansar of Al-Aws wal-Khazraj in Medina. So, but he had his own copy. That copy would not actually included in the last gathering of the Quran because it was not supported by mutawatir. So it was not done by multitude of the companions. So that was how it was gathered with the 7 dialects. Uthman radiallahu anhu ordered the writing of the copy based on what Zayd ibn Thabit learned, and that the differences in any of the verses could be referred to the dialect of Quraysh. So the script of Uthman, the script of the, let's say, we say al-Rasm al-Uthmani, the script of Uthman radiallahu anhu, was predominantly upon the dialect of Quraysh, was predominantly upon the dialect of Quraysh, and may also meet the different variations of pronunciation that was also confirmed from the other 7 dialects. Now, there are certain, I don't want to go into the details of, examples of how these dialects were, but there are certain dialects where sometimes there's an extra word or a different word that does not meet the script of Uthman. And it was not according to the dialect of Quraysh, but it did not change the meaning. It's the same meaning. It's exactly the same meaning, but it was based on a dialect that was for a certain tribe. In this, that was not written down, but mostly because we know that the Quran was written without any punctuation marks, without dots, or these short vowels or short sounds. So you would find that a lot of the people who had different dialects would read the same script of Uthman and read it according to their own dialect without any difficulty. Some of these dialects had different word order, was not included in the book of Uthman. I'll give you an example, or the script of Uthman. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu used to read the ayah, وَجَاءَتْ سَكْرَةُ الْمَوْتِ بِالْحَقِّ. This is the ayah, وَجَاءَتْ سَكْرَةُ الْمَوْتِ بِالْحَقِّ. That now the stupor of death came in truth. He used to read it, وَجَاءَتْ سَكْرَةُ الْحَقِّ بِالْمَوْتِ. Also, although both are, narrated from the Prophet ﷺ, they were different. There was a different dialect from the Prophet ﷺ, but it was not what was put in the or fixed or confirmed in the script of Uthman radiallahu anhu is وَجَاءَتْ سَكْرَةُ الْمَوْتِ بِالْحَقِّ which actually agreed with the last browsing and review, and agreed with the multitude of Sahaba who memorized it that way. Hundreds of Sahaba who memorized it that way, but Abu Bakr used to read it in a different way, which is a different dialect. So you could not find that in the Quran. You wouldn't find the ayah written two different ways. That is not the script of Uthman. The script of Uthman is exactly the same Quran that we're reading right now, but it gave room for different dialects that they can read it actually, because there were no dots or punctuation marks or things like this. In this way, they can actually read it. If it is only different, like in changing of the pronunciation, like ta'lamun or ya'lamun, or ni'mal or na'mal, or things like this. The haraka, or the sound that can be placed on the words or on the letters. So it was finally gathered by Uthman radiallahu anhu in 4 copies that had these characteristics that are very important that we know them. There are 4 characteristics to the book or the script of Uthman. The first one is that it only included what was actually transmitted and kept and confirmed and written down in the way of tawatur, meaning through multitude of Sahaba who learned it from the Prophet ﷺ, and they taught it to multitude of their followers. That is what we call tawatur. Add to that the writing of the script by the companions, as we described in the way of the gathering of the Quran at the time of Abu Bakr. Then the second one is that the ayat of the Quran that was written at the time of Uthman did not include the abrogated verses. There are a few abrogated verses and nasikh that were not there because it was based on the last review done by the Prophet ﷺ with Jibreel alayhi salam in the last year of his life. Now, a very important characteristic of the Mus'haf Uthman is that it established the order of the surahs. It's not chronological because the Quran was revealed chronologically in different ways, but the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ will tell the scribes of the Quran, as Zayd bin Thabit described, that put this verse after that or before that. So they will know exactly the place of each verse in each surah. So they know, for example, Surah Al-Baqarah, all the verses of the order of the verses of Surah Al-Baqarah were dictated by Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, who was taught that order from Jibreel, taught that order from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But by the will of Allah, of course, the order of the surahs was actually an ijtihad of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ and Uthman radiallahu anhu during that time when they came to put all this in a form of a book like this. They did this order. You have Al-Fatiha, then you have, which is the opening, then you have a Sab' al-Tiwal, the 7 long surahs. Al-Sab' al-Tiwal, which is 7 long surahs, Al-Baqarah, Ali Imran, Al-Nisa, Al-Ma'idah, Al-An'am, Al-A'raf, Al-Anfal wa Tawbah. We have to put Al-Anfal wa Tawbah together. Because now when they came to Surah At-Tawbah and how it started, they saw that it was not started with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Whereas all the other surahs written down would start with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Surah At-Tawbah did not. So what their ijtihad was, because the subject matter of Surah At-Tawbah is so similar to Al-Anfal, and it would actually complete it. It was like a completion of Surah Al-Anfal, but he don't want to make it into one surah because that is something he cannot do. The surahs that were decided by the Prophet ﷺ, Surah Bara'a or Surah At-Tawbah was decided by the Prophet ﷺ to be Surah At-Tawbah, Surah Al-Anfal as well. But because there's no Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim on Surah At-Tawbah, it was joined with a Sab' al-Tuwal, Al-Anfal, one of them. So even though Al-Anfal is only 75 verses or 45 verses, it was 75 verses. It was not long, but still, add to that Surah At-Tawbah, it becomes a Sab' al-Tuwal or 7 long surahs. So this order was established by ijtihad of the companions, including Uthman radiallahu anhu. Whereas the order of the verses in the Quran were tawqifi, meaning it was done by revelation that was sent to Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, that these are the verses that constitute this surah. And this surah, the order of these verses are established by the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, learned from Jibreel, dictated from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The last characteristic is that it was written down in such a script that would actually include and give room to all different variation of recitation. As we know, we have the 10 qira'at, the 10 styles of recitation. These styles of recitation were actually ways of recitation that were done through the companions of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, learned from Prophet Muhammad ﷺ himself. So they're different from the 7 letters or 7 dialects. However, they may have remnants of the 7 letters. They may have what is left of the 7 letters. So you could find that sometimes in these qira'at, but they're different. They're not the same. They are like style of recitation in ways of, what letters are pronounced heavy, what letters are pronounced light, where you articulate the letter from, how you pronounce this letter, the elongation or the, whether you want to pronounce the hamza or not pronounce the hamza, as in the dialect of Quraysh, they say dhib. They don't pronounce the hamza, dhib, which is a wolf. In the language of Asad, they say dhib. Things of that nature. Whether you say, when to pronounce the Hamzat al-Wasl as an actual Hamza, or when to just not do that. So all of these different styles of recitation, as we would call them, al-qira'at al-ashra, one of the scholars called them the 7 qira'at. It was a mistake on his part to call them the 7, because now people are actually confusing them with the 7 dialects of the Quran. They're different. So what we will say here is the script of Uthman radiallahu anhu gave room to these different styles of recitation. So someone from, let's say, Morocco or Algeria can get a copy of the Quran that was written in Hafs, in the narration of Hafs, or the Qira'at Hafs and Nafi', and they would read it in Warsh. I mean, there are certain different punctuations now in these different styles or different Mus'haf you find, but they're the same script. They're exactly the same script. If you take out the punctuation, it will be exactly the same script of the Quran, only where the dots are or where the harakat are. So that is, these are the characteristics of the Mus'haf Uthman. And by this, alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala preserved his book and preserved his ummah, preserved his ummah from discord and from fitna and from differing on the book of Allah. Uthman, after that, took all the other copies except the copy of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. He kept it with Hafsa, but all the Sahaba were told to submit their copy of as-Suhuf, like Ubay bin Ka'ab, Ali bin Abi Talib, Abdullah bin Mas'ud. A lot of them resisted because it was difficult for them. They They wrote things, they wrote their comments. Ibn Mas'ud actually took time for him to submit his copy. All these copies that were not supposed to be actually read by anyone, because now all of us are reading the Quran, exactly the same Quran that was revealed to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but without the dialects, without those 7 dialects, except what the script of Uthman could actually give room to. But the rest were ordered by Uthman to be burned. And Ali radiallahu anhu actually mentioned something about this, that he says that, oh, you people make a big deal when some people started saying he burned the Qur'ans and things like this. Ali radiallahu anhu said, oh people, you are talking about a companion of the Prophet ﷺ that had the best interest of the Ummah, the best interest of the Book of Allah, and he gathered the Quran and preserved it, and he protected the Muslim Ummah from discord and fitna. When he did that, it was to serve the Book of Allah. If I were in his place, I would probably have done the same way. That's what Ali radiallahu anhu said. As we know, Ali praised both Abu Bakr and Umar and Uthman with the efforts that they did, in preserving the Quran, the effort of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, and the effort of Uthman radiallahu anhu. And alhamdulillah, the Book of Allah has been preserved by the promise of Allah when He said, "Inna nahnu nazzalna dhikra wa inna lahu lahafidhun," through the meticulous methodology of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his companions after him, and that was transmitted to us through a mutawatir chain of narration, mutawatir, which is multitude, tens and hundreds of people who memorize the Quran. As we know now, millions of people have memorized the Quran. If there are no copies of the Quran anymore, you can still write the Quran from the memory of people who are able to produce it from their memory exactly as it was revealed to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. As we see even now, people who have memorized the Quran, they can tell you actually the chain of transmission from their sheikh who taught them and gave them ijazah, gave them license to teach it, to the, let's say, the qari who actually taught that qira'ah, to the companion who learned it from Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to Jibril, and to Rabb al-Izzah Azza wa Jal. And I mean, what more can we ask for? Anyone who is given an ijazah, actually they are given an ijazah with a huge chain of transmission from them to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam to Jibril and to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Alhamdulillah, Allah preserved this book by His promise. Alhamdulillah, Allah preserved it by also the meticulous methodology and the accurate methodology of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his companions, and the followers who follow in their footsteps. Jazakumullah khair. This will conclude our talk about the compilation of the Quran. What I will do, inshallah, next is to start talking about the documentation of the Sunnah of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the stages that it went through. Jazakumullah khair wa barakallahu feekum, and inshallah we'll see you next time. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.